Okay, we are going on to our next story. This is in reference to, if you have not heard, Joe Biden again. RFK Jr. had some things to say to Joe Biden in reference to Joe Biden's nomination for a Trump appointee. His name is Elliot Abrams, who is very problematic, especially in reference to foreign policy. But again, this just goes to show you how Joe Biden is not that different as people tried to make him seem in reference to when you compare him to Donald Trump. Now, this is coming from Common Dreams, and that's Elliot Abrams. Totally indefensible. Biden nominates death squad backer Elliot Abrams to diplomacy panel. Elliot Abrams, enemy of human rights, apologist for mass murder, should have no place within spitting distance of any Democratic administration in any capacity. This is by Jake Johnson. This came out on July 4th. President Joe Biden on Monday quietly nominated Elliot Abrams to serve on a bipartisan diplomacy commission, a move that human rights advocates condemned as outrageous, given the longtime Republicans' officials' past as a defender of Latin American death squads and cheerleader for murderous U.S. foreign policy interventions. A totally indefensible decision from Biden. This is coming from Mehdi Hassan, pointing to Abrams' guilty plea stemming from the Reagan-era Iran-Contra scandal and his broader record in Latin America. Most recently, Abrams served as a Trump administration special envoy to Iran and Venezuela. During a 2019 House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing, Representative Ilhan Omar grilled Abrams on his role in the Reagan's administration policy in El Salvador, whose U.S.-backed military carried out the largest massacre in modern Latin American history in 1981 and around the village of El Mozat. Now, I want to chime in here for a second because this is not the kind of thing that you'll see the women on The View complain about. And for Ana Navarro, and in the many times that she's talked about how people in Latin America are struggling, you won't hear them talking about this, though. Can't, because it's Joe Biden that's doing it. If Donald Trump was doing this, when Donald Trump, he was a part of Trump's administration, liberal media could talk about it then. But you can't do it when it's Joe Biden's doing it, because then you have to admit that Joe Biden has similarities to Trump, boo. Omar noted during the 2019 hearing that Abrams later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. After recounting the appalling details of the El Mozad killings, in which around 140 children were murdered, Omar asked Abrams, "Do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?" That is a ridiculous question, and I will not respond to it. So that was Elliot's response. I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question. See, now it's personal because someone's asking him about something that he did. You can see this here.
Ms. Omar.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimonies. Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
On February,
that was not a question. That was I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mosote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by US-trained troops.
Essentially, this guy was a neocon and proud of it.
During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the US policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I will
Yes
not
or no?
No.
I will
Sorry,
take-
Mr.
I will
Chairman,
take
but
that
I'm-
as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving US interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
This is the gentleman that Joe Biden just nominated. And the Democratic Party doesn't want to have any debates. They don't want you to hear from any other challengers. They have already selected Joe Biden, the DNC says. They expect you just to throw Joe Biden right back in the White House just because he's already sitting there. And I wish more people would call this out.
Whether under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question. Because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
So that also includes the massacres. That includes the raids that have happened. So just keep that in mind. The way that they will frame it is say that we're there to actually help the people in Venezuela. There's money involved here. The people in Venezuela probably wouldn't need this help if it wasn't countries like the US government that sold arms to these countries in the first damn place and caused the people to be in fear of people in their own countries. You wouldn't have these issues. But you notice he didn't want to answer that question because how can you, right? So it says, in response to the news of the Biden administration's decision to nominate Abrams to the State Department's Advisory Commission on Public Diplomacy, former longtime Human Rights Watch executive director Kenneth Roth wrote that Abrams' most notorious public diplomacy is downplaying the 1981 El Mossad massacre of 1,000 people by U.S. trained and equipped Salvadorian military units. And this is just an example of the U.S. supplying arms to some of these countries. And then you see what happens. The weapons end up in the hands of people who decide to try to take over and be militant. But again, there's money to be made here. That's why they're selling the arms, so they can get paid. So that is the controversy in reference to who he has chosen to nominate. And RFK Jr. had some things to say about this. RFK Jr. said President Biden has appointed disgraced neocon Abrams to his diplomacy commission. Infamous for his support of El Salvador's death squads in 1980, Abrams was convicted in 1989 of lying to Congress about his criminal role in the Iran-Contra affair. So these people are just crooks. It's just from one crook to the next. These people are just crooks. So let's go on. He goes on to say, after being pardoned by George H.W. Bush, Abrams later went on to further hegemony as a key architect of the catastrophic invasion of Iraq as national security advisor to George W. Bush. So he went from one Bush to the other Bush. And now he went to Trump, and now he's going to Biden. He continues, Abrams most recently served as Trump's envoy to Iran and Venezuela. President Biden has now recalled Abrams from exile with an appointment that will allow him to cause maximum damage to America's declining reputation across the globe. With this appointment, the marriage of the Biden administration and the neocons can be said to be consummated. There really is not that much different between Biden and Trump. There's an account you should follow on Twitter called Tracking Biden from the Left. And that's what they do. They track Biden from the left, and they point out a lot of similarities that Biden has with Donald Trump. So the White House has not had a good week. Now, that's one thing that happened. Actually, the second thing, we talked about the federal judge and the social media. You have this issue about nominating Elliott Abrams. And then there was another little thing that happened. Apparently, somebody seemed to have dropped a white powdery substance in the White House. That was discovered on the 4th of July in the West Wing, which is where the president resides. Listen to this.
Welcome back. As I mentioned, we have new reporting right now on that white powdery substance that was found in a work area inside the White House's West Wing. A source familiar with the investigation tells me that during a preliminary field test completed by the D.C. Fire Department Sunday night, the substance tested positive as cocaine. That source also says that the substance was found in a small dime-sized bag. NBC's Mike Memley joins me now from outside the White House. Mike, this is kind of a startling situation here, right? The question being, and it could have been a preliminary test, we'll wait to see whether a final test is conclusive, but how and who would have got this into the White House?
Gee, I wonder who it could belong to. Let's think about this for a second, folks. Has Hunter been in the West Wing recently? Let's go on.
Yeah, that's right, Peter. I mean, we certainly didn't have this on our news bingo card on this Independence Day, but it was significant to learn that it was not a hazardous substance, but one that is certainly an illegal substance, and two, the part of the White House in which it was discovered. This was a uniformed officer as part of the U.S. Secret Service's uniformed division who was conducting a routine patrol of the White House on Sunday and discovered this. Now, the fact that it was in the West Wing is important. It narrows down the real estate. It wasn't the executive mansion where we have most of the ceremonial spaces as well as the private residence for the first family. It wasn't the executive office building across the street, which is a much more occupied part of the real estate where most of the executive staff works. We're talking about the West Wing where obviously the Oval Office, the president's senior staff, and their assistants work. So that
actually didn't make it sound better for Joe Biden. I'm sorry, but that doesn't make it sound better for Joe Biden when he narrowed it down that way. I don't think that did what he thought that it would do. It actually pointed it more towards Joe Biden's direction. So that's the funny part.
Obviously leads to the question that is being posed into the West Wing right now. How did this material come in to the White House. It could have been a White House staffer. It could have been somebody who was being escorted as part of a meeting in the White House, or it might have been somebody, as we often see on the course of weekends, staff often are giving tours to members of their family and to other guests. And so that's just one of the...
Or it could have just been him. Is that what's been happening? Is that how they've been trying to perk up Joe Biden for these press conferences, because to keep him alert or something? Or did Hunter drop something on his way out? Come on. Don't bring up the tourists or the tour guides or any of these people. It could have just came from the family. Let's be real. How you going to sit here and talk about this and pretend like Joe Biden doesn't have a son who has an addiction issue? How are you just going to leave that out of the conversation? And also, where's that crime bill at this point in time? Because you see, that never applied to Joe Biden's son.
Questions now that's going to be posed to the White House. It's also worth noting that the president and other members of the First Family were not at the White House. President Biden, the First Lady, as well as his son Hunter and his family departed the White House on Friday and only returned.
That doesn't mean anything. Let's think about something for a second. You were at your house on Friday and you left Friday afternoon. Because you are no longer at your house, does that mean that that dime bag at your house isn't yours? Not necessarily. That doesn't mean, just because they weren't there don't mean anything. It could have dropped on the way out. But you get the point I pointed out? He told you Hunter Biden was there. So again, I wonder who it could have belonged to. Hunter Biden was there Friday. So don't be surprised if he might have dropped it out. And even if he did drop it on his way out and it did belong to him, you think Joe Biden's going to come forward and admit that? They'll blame it on a staffer before they blame it on the real perpetrator here.
Today, this morning, where, of course, the president tonight is going to be hosting a barbecue for military families and others on the South Lawn to celebrate the nation's birthday today, Peter.
Mike, you're there at the White House. Are they saying, or officials there saying anything about this discovery?
No, we're only hearing at this point from the Secret Service, which has outlined the ways in which this was discovered and the investigation steps going forward. You can be sure, as White House officials are joining those on the South Lawn, they're also asking this question because this is certainly an embarrassment to the White House. This is something that, as we know, is an illegal substance that officials here are going to be highly scrutinized. I think the story itself got a lot of attention, especially on social media today, largely from the president's critics. And so there's going to be an effort very quickly to try to get to the bottom of what happened here so they can try to diffuse some of that speculation.
Yeah, no doubt. Mike Memley there with you. You can hear some protesters, activists, and others in the background there outside the White House as well. Mike, thank you very much.
Mike looks like he doesn't breathe. Now, listen, what was also interesting, I was thinking about something, and I'm going to show you what the press secretary, Karine, said about this substance. But what I was thinking about something for a second, and I was like, what if somebody in the Democratic Party is just like, man, we really want this motherfucker out of here. We really do not want this guy to run again. I got an idea. You go in, just drop the bag, drop it in the West Wing, and then peace out. You never know. Doesn't the White House have cameras everywhere? Can't they just go look back at the cameras and see if somebody just happened to drop something somewhere? Now, this is the audio from the Secret Service. Listen to what they said when they found it. This is interesting.
To repeat, I didn't copy your results on the Gemini.
Gemini's results are new match found with a red bar, new match found in the library. We'll go ahead back and come on up. Correction record has that we have a result on the Gemini. We have a yellow bar stating cocaine, hydrochloride, gas number 53-21-4.
So that was when the Secret Service basically discovered it and told people like, yeah, this is actually this. Now, Corinne Jean-Pierre, she actually was questioned about this at the White House from Simon Ataba. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him. He's a journalist from Africa. She usually doesn't call on him. He's made a point to call that shit out too, that she'll ignore him. They have this thing where like they ignore the journalists from Africa. What's that all about? Anywho, of course, she is pressed about this question in reference to the substance, and you got to see this.
I just don't have anything to share at this time.
And secondly, per the entry, go to the holiday. Can you give any more details on where the Secret Service found cocaine in the West Wing and how it got there?
So, as you know, this is under the purview of the Secret Service. They are currently investigating what happened over the weekend, so I would have to refer you to the Secret Service on all of this. But one thing that I can share, that I'll share a little bit more information. As you know, the president and the first lady and their family were not here this weekend, as you all reported on this, and as you also know that they left on Friday and returned just yesterday. Where this was discovered is a heavily traveled area where many White House, West Wing, I should be even more specific, West Wing visitors come through this particular area. I just don't have anything more to share. It is under investigation by the Secret Service. This is in their purview, and so we're going to allow certainly the investigation to continue, and we have confidence that the Secret Service will get to the bottom of this. Go ahead.
In other words, defer to the Secret Service. I defer to the Secret Service. You have questions, you need to ask them, as if they can just easily ask the Secret Service these questions.
The president said, hey, let's get to the bottom of what happened here.
Well, I just said that we have confidence that the Secret Service is going to get to the bottom of this. As you all know, the president follows all the reporting here, and he certainly was briefed by his staff on everything that we know so far. But the Secret Service is investigating this, is investigating what happened over the weekend, and we have confidence that they will get to the bottom of this.
Secondly, is there still a chance that Sweden will be approved into NATO?
And I think the Sweden Prime Minister being here today, having a meeting with the president, certainly shows that commitment.
Okay. Thanks, Free. Just two quick follow-ups. You said the president has been briefed on the cocaine that was found at the White House. Is the White House conducting its own internal investigation?
This is something that's under the purview of the Secret Service. They're the ones who handle this investigation, so it lives in their purview, in their work.
Right, but you're the press secretary. It may live in their purview, but you are the press secretary. So people are obviously going to come to you with the questions and not the Secret Service. So that's the part that's really interesting to me, is just that, of course, they're going to ask you because you're supposed to be the spokesperson here for the president of the United States.
World.
And then just a quick follow-up on this type of tour. Can you explain to the American people who would have access to the West Wing on this type of tour and what kind of protocols are in place?
So look, when it comes to security protocol, that's something that the Secret Service certainly is going to handle, and so that is a question for them. When it comes to visitors to the West Wing, they come for many reasons. Obviously, we do have West Wing tours that occur here on campus. They happen in this particular past couple of days. They happen on Friday, they happen on Saturday and Sunday. The times that they do not happen is when there's a federal holiday, like yesterday, there was not a West Wing tour.
Pause. This is the part I wanted you to hear. This part right here. She kind of tells something here without probably intending to do so.
They happen in this particular past couple of days. They happen on Friday, they happen on Saturday and Sunday. The times that they do not happen is when there's a federal holiday, like yesterday, there was not.
The tours don't happen when there is a federal holiday, but that is when the substance was found. It was found on July 4th. Just something to keep in mind.
A West Wing tour, and also when there's a large White House event. So I don't have anything more to share on the particulars. Again, when it comes to security, when it comes to anything of those types of protocols, that is something that Secret Service handles. Okay, Asia.
Thanks, Karine.
And congratulations.
Thank
Should I call you President Asia?
I appreciate it. Sure.
I was waiting. I was like, okay, that went over the head or got missed.
One president. It's not my turn. It's not my turn.
One president at a time, Risha.
Eventually.
Incoming president, maybe.
We just I wonder if the cocaine episode has prompted the White House to ask the Secret Service to review its security protocol for visitors coming in.
So let them do their investigation. Again, this is under their purview. Let's see exactly what occurred and what happened. They're going to get to the bottom of this. They meaning the Secret Service, not going to get ahead of any changes in protocol or anything like that. Let's let the Secret Service do their job, which we believe and have all the confidence that they will get to the bottom of this.
This episode kind of shines a light on the fact that you can bring in illegal substances into the White House. So what's preventing a visitor from bringing in anthrax or something that's not magnetic into the White House?
No, look.
Whoa! Let's talk about this for a second. The fact that someone could just bring it in. We think this was the first time? I don't think so. There are a couple of documentaries I think that you should watch about other presidents that we've had in the past who were also kind of known to do a little bit of something while they were there. But there's cameras everywhere. And you mean to tell me not one camera caught this little baggie drop and fall? Not one camera. Or maybe they did see and they're not going to mention it because it's someone that they don't want to mention.
I totally understand the question, but it is under investigation. We're going to get to the bottom to exactly what happened. The Secret Service will, not us. And so we're going to let the Secret Service do their job. I'm just not going to get ahead of if or whens or changes. We just have to let the Secret Service do their job, which they are. You're welcome.
So yeah, it has not been a great week for Joe Biden. I don't even know, I don't know what else to say, but it has been interesting times that we are in right now. But there's a lot going on with all of that. So yeah, it'll be interesting if we do ever hear anything else from the Secret Service. I'm going to go to some of these comments in the chat. Thank you for the super chat, Frank. Rome is burning and saying it isn't burning. I heard, for people who don't know, Macron's trying to make it so that people can't really, talk about the protests and things that are happening in France right now. He's going to try to censor that information. Thank you for the super chat, Nicole. The fact that people are shocked is laughable. I'm shocked he didn't appoint him sooner. I think you meant. Yeah, interesting. Thank you, Frank. Elliot Abrams looks like he has to sit on some phone books so he can reach the top of the table. #evil. He did look really short in that. I don't know. Maybe it was a low chair. Dwayne says the Democrats must be confronted for appointing people like Abrams and Victoria Nuland. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the super chat, Nicole. We sure bringing democracy to Ukraine. Good point. And thank you for the super chat, M. Smith. There are different factions of the left. This is true. We're about to get into all of that. Red says there's a video circulating on Twitter of Hunter Biden apparently high on something a few days after they found that substance. Oh, thank you for letting me know about that, Red. I wasn't aware of that. Bill says, yeah, how many camera blind spots even exist in and around the White House? I would imagine 0. Right. Because the main job, the security is to protect the president, right? And the president's family. So that's why I said they got to have cameras everywhere. And thank you for the super chat, Lorez. Dems so prog. Karina proof LGBT is corrupt as res. Well, I think we all know the fact that she was chosen by Jen Psaki is that says a lot. They pick people who are establishment.